Hey guys, how's it going? Jake Baynes here, and today I'm going to give you guys a walkthrough of how I get my tones with the brand new MixWave Big Muff Black Russian pedal. Let's take a look. Okay, so first things first, it's very important to make sure that we get our bass amp tone before we even bother with looking at the pedal, because how we drive this amp with the pedal is so important. All right, so today I'm going to be using the JHS Loud is More Good plugin as my amp. And I have the amp set reasonably simple here. I have the volume up to about 9, trebles at about 7, middles at about 7, and bass is around 4.5, and it sounds something like this. I always aim for slightly overdriven and a little bit on the brighter side when it comes to fuzz pedals. It's very important to make sure that we put our fuzz pedal before the amp. So if you ever experience any situation where it's super harsh sounding, that fuzz pedal might be after your amp and it's worth taking a look. Now, with the JHS Loud is More Good, I also have one of the overdrive pedals on the amp turned on. It is the Morning Glory pedal. Check this out. So for this, here are my settings. I've got the volume at 7.4. I have the drive at 2. And I have the tone at 7.4, and I have it on the down selector switch for gain, and it sounds like this. So that's how I set up the amp, getting everything prepared for this fantastic new fuzz pedal that MixWave has just put out. So let's take a look at how I set up the fuzz pedal and go through some of the parameters so that we can understand what everything sounds like. Let's dive in. Okay, so at this point, hopefully you have your new fuzz pedal that you've just purchased open and ready to go, and you've got your amp ready to go, and you set all of your tones. But now it's time to take a look and figure out, what does everything do on this pedal and what does it sound like? So first things first, with everything set neutral right out the box, it's going to be set something like this, where everything's at 12 o'clock and our dry wet switch is at 100%, and it's going to sound something like this. Check this out. So here's completely dry, and here's the pedal on. Holy smokes, that's super intense, but it sounds like a fuzz and it sounds fantastic. Very, very fuzzy. Now let's take a look. So the first thing that I always set when it comes to fuzz pedals is the tone. I like to do a sweep of the tone and kind of get an understanding of where do things really start to change. And so because this sculpts so much of the sound, here's kind of what I'm going to do. All right, so I'm going to set the tone where it is, and I'm going to start sweeping it higher and higher so we get an idea of what that sounds like. Here we go. Getting a little brighter. Here it is, getting a little more distortion. Mid-rangey, a little darker. Let's go all the way up. Max it. Awesome. Now I'm going to go in the opposite direction to see what that does. Getting a little darker. Kind of Eric Johnson tones here. Even further back. And let's go all the way. Amazing. So for me personally, I like it somewhere around here, right? Where it's cutting through and some of that mid-range bark is coming back into the pedal. So the next knob I'm going to touch is the sustain knob. Now the sustain knob is basically our drive knob, or our overdrive distortion sounding knob. And let's take a look at the sweep of this and kind of see what it does here. So this is it set at 12. Now let's start turning it up slowly and see what happens. sounds like it's just holding on, which is that falling apart, the fallout shelter kind of thing we get with the fuzz. Awesome. So sustain-wise for me, I'm not a super overdriven kind of guy. I'm gonna pull this back just a little bit so he sits around here. Sweet. Now the last thing to touch is the volume knob. So the volume knob is going to be how loud is this fuzz as it slams into the front end of our JHS. Loud is more good amp here. So I'm going to turn this up slowly and we're going to get an idea of how this overdrives the amp. Now, whenever we're using a fuzz pedal, it's important to know two overdrives are, well, in this situation, two overdrives are happening at the same time. One of them is the amp overdriving. And in this situation, I'm using the tubes to overdrive the amp. I have the amp cranked. The other overdrive that's happening is the pedal itself. Now the volume knob is what bridges the gap between these two things. I can overdrive the front end of this amp harder using the volume knob of the Black Russian here. And so as I turn this up, what you'll notice is the mid-range and all the amps going to kind of come together. It's going to squash even harder because I'm slamming the front end of this amp so hard. So check it out. Absolute insanity. I'm gonna pull it back a little bit now. All right, here we go. Yeah, right around here feels pretty good for me right now. Now, finally, the last thing that I'm going to mess with, and I urge all of you guys to check this out, is this dry-wet switch, this fader that is on all of the JHS pedals. In fact, you can see it on the Morning Glory here. It's right down here, dry, wet. Now, what this does, basically, for those of you who don't know, dry signal is going to be the signal that we get that is just a guitar, all right? It's not colored by the pedal. Wet is how much of that effect we're adding into the signal, right? How wet is the signal with this? And so in this instance, how much of the big muff do we want impacting our tone? All right, and so at the moment, it's 100% big muff. This is as if you were playing with it on a pedal board. But one of the benefits of having this as a plugin is that you can actually roll this back and get more tonal options. Now, personally with this, I actually like it rolled back a little bit. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna roll it back. I'm going to roll it back to about 4.7, and you're going to notice a difference here. So I'm going to actually go back to 100%. I'm going to roll it back. Check it out. We still have the fuzz characteristics, but we have a lot more of the amp, and it sounds a little bit more controlled. Clean. Fuzz. Gosh, that sounds good. You'll notice that fuzz really fills up the sound. So that's how I set my fuzz tones with the new MixWave Electro-Harmonix Big Muff Black Russian. I hope you guys enjoy. Have fun with the new fuzz pedal. I'll see you guys soon. Take it easy.